What would you say if you had only 30 seconds to save your entire species? That was the question racing through Lyra's mind as she stood on the observation deck of the Kethrin War Fleet, watching Earth's blue marble grow larger in the view screen. Her pointed ears twitching with an anxiety she'd never felt in her 5 years as an intelligence officer for the Galactic Dominion. The fleet had already consumed 17 worlds, each one falling within days, their civilizations archived and their resources harvested. And this primitive blue planet was supposed to be the easiest conquest yet. A backwater spinning in ignorance while the greatest military force in 3 galaxies descended upon it like a storm. Lyra pressed her palm against the cold glass, her luminescent skin casting a faint silver glow in the darkened room, her platinum hair falling across her shoulders as she leaned forward, trying to understand why her hands were shaking. She had reviewed the data packets 100 times since they'd entered this star system. Earth's fractured nations, their crude nuclear weapons, their barely functional space programs, and every strategic model showed the same outcome: total human capitulation within 72 hours of first contact. So why did she feel like they were making a terrible mistake? Officer Lyra, a voice crackled through her cum implant, making her jump slightly. High Command requests your presence in strategic analysis. Priority Alpha. She took one last look at Earth, at the swirling white clouds over its vast oceans, and wondered if anyone down there knew what was coming. If they were looking up at the stars tonight and sensing the doom that hung just beyond their moon. The strategic analysis chamber hummed with activity when she arrived. 36 officers from various species clustered around holographic displays showing Earth's major population centers marked in red, projected casualty rates scrolling past in cold, clinical numbers that made Lyra's stomach turn, though she'd seen such displays 16 times before without flinching. "Ah, Lyra," Commander Thorax acknowledged her with a curt nod of his massive, horned head, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights. "We intercepted something unusual from the human communication networks, a broadcast that's spreading across their entire planet. And High Command wants your assessment before we proceed with first contact protocols." He gestured to a junior technician who activated a playback. And suddenly the chamber filled with the voice of a human male, speaking in one of Earth's dominant languages that Lyra's implant automatically translated, the words washing over her like cold water. "My name is Dr. Marcus Chen," the voice began, calm and steady, despite the slight tremor beneath it. "And if you're hearing this, it means the transmission array worked. Which means someone out there is listening, which means we're not alone. And that thought should terrify you as much as it terrifies us." Lyra found herself leaning closer to the holographic display, showing the source a modest research facility in what the humans called California as the voice continued. "We know you're coming. 3 days ago, our deep space telescopes detected the gravitational anomalies of your fleet. We're not as primitive as you think, just resource limited. But that's not why I'm sending this message into the dark. I'm sending it because you need to understand something about humanity before you make what might be the last mistake your civilization ever makes." A ripple of amused dismissal moved through the gathered officers. But Lyra noticed that Commander Thorax hadn't moved, his reptilian eyes fixed on the display with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "We've been fighting for survival since before we climbed down from the trees, Dr. Chen's voice continued, gaining strength. "Ice ages, plagues, predators with bigger teeth and stronger claws, supervolcanoes and asteroid impacts and droughts that should have ended us 1,000 times over. We've fought wars against each other for millennia, turned science into weapons and weapons into art. And the thing you need to understand, the thing that should make you turn your ships around right now, is that we never, ever stop." The recording crackled with static for a moment, and Lyra realized she was holding her breath, her analytical mind already cataloging something in the human's tone that didn't match any psychological profile she'd studied. "You can destroy our cities, Dr. Chen said, and now his voice dropped to something almost conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made it more chilling. "And we'll fight from the rubble. You can poison our air, and we'll build underground. You can hunt us to the last million, the last 1,000, the last 100. And those survivors will become something you can't imagine. Something that will wait and learn and grow strong in the dark places you forget to check. And one day, maybe in 10 years, maybe in 1,000, they'll come for you. And they will not forgive, and they will not forget. Because that's what we do. That's what evolution made us. We're the species that looked at death and said, "Not today." The chamber had gone completely silent. Now, and Lyra felt something cold settling in her chest as the message continued. "I'm not sending this as a threat, Doctor," Chen said, and impossibly, she could hear what sounded like a sad smile in his voice. "I'm sending it as a courtesy, one sentient species to another. Because maybe you have children too, maybe you have poets and artists and dreamers who've never known war. And I don't want their blood on our hands any more than I want ours on yours. We're willing to talk. We're willing to learn. We're willing to join whatever community exists out there among the stars and contribute everything we can, our art, our science, our perspective. But if you come here with conquest in mind, if you force us to become the monsters we're capable of being, then God help us all, because we will drag you down with us. And the galaxy will remember Earth not as a victim, but as the death world that broke an empire." The recording ended. And for a long moment, no one spoke, the weight of those words hanging in the recycled air like smoke. Finally, Commander Thorax turned to Lyra, his expression unreadable. "Analysis officer?" She swallowed hard, her mind racing through everything she'd learned about human history in her preparation for this mission, their wars, their survival of multiple extinction events, their frankly insane tendency to pack bond with predators and turn them into companions. "Sir," she began, choosing her words carefully, "I believe we need to take this seriously. Human neurochemistry shows abnormally high pain tolerance and stress response. Their world has a gravitational pull 1.3 times what most species evolved under. Their fiction glorifies last stands and impossible victories. Every psychological indicator suggests that Dr. Chen isn't bluffing. Humans literally don't have the same self-preservation parameters we do." Thorax's eyes narrowed. "You're suggesting we abort the entire operation because of one human's desperate propaganda?" "I'm suggesting," Lyra said, her voice steadier than she felt, "that we have 17 conquered worlds and nothing to prove, while humans have everything to lose and a documented history of suicidal tenacity when cornered. The risk-reward ratio doesn't justify proceeding." Another officer, a spindly archon named Velix, made a dismissive gesture with three of his arms. "They're a single-planet species with barely functional spaceflight. Even if every word is true, what are they going to do against a fleet that's leveled civilizations 1,000 years more advanced?" And that's when Lyra realized what had been bothering her since they'd entered the system, why her instincts were screaming at her despite all the logical data. "They don't need to defeat us in open battle," she said quietly, and every eye in the room turned to her. "They just need to make conquering them more costly than leaving them alone. Think about it, every world we've taken capitulated because their leadership did the rational thing and surrendered to save their populations. But humans elect their leaders from among themselves. They're not a hive mind or a logical collective. They're 8 billion individuals who've spent their entire evolutionary history surviving impossible odds. And if even a fraction of them decide to fight the way Dr. Chen described, we'll be fighting a guerrilla war on a planet-wide scale against an enemy on their home terrain with nothing left to lose." She pulled up a holographic display of human history, highlighting certain entries. "They have a saying, 'Lions led by lions.' In one of their major wars, a small nation held off an empire for years through sheer refusal to quit. In another, resistance fighters made occupying forces' lives hell with nothing but improvised weapons and knowledge of local terrain. And that was humans fighting other humans with comparable technology. Against us, with our supply lines stretched across light years, our warriors bred for conventional warfare, our complete unfamiliarity with their environment." She let the implication hang. Commander Thorax stared at the hologram for a long moment, his claws tapping a slow rhythm on the console. "High Command will want more than historical speculation," he said finally. But Lyra could hear the doubt creeping into his voice. And she knew she had to press her advantage. Had to make them understand before it was too late. "Then let me go down there," she heard herself say, the words escaping before her rational mind could stop them, and the shocked silence that followed told her just how unprecedented her suggestion was. "Let me make contact with Dr. Chen, assess the situation personally, and report back. If I'm wrong, we've lost nothing but a few hours. If I'm right, I might be able to establish actual diplomatic channels before we start something we can't finish." The debate that followed was intense, with half the officers calling her idea reckless and the other half intrigued by the possibility of a bloodless solution, but Lyra barely heard them. her mind already racing ahead to what she'd say if she actually met this human who'd had the audacity to threaten a galactic armada with nothing but words and conviction. In the end, Commander Thorax made the decision himself, overriding the objections with a simple logic. If the humans are planning a trap, better we spring it with one shuttle than the whole fleet. And if Officer Lyra is correct about their psychology, sending a lone emissary shows we're willing to talk rather than simply attack. 4 hours later, Lyra sat in a small landing craft descending through Earth's atmosphere, her hands surprisingly steady on the controls, despite the fact that she was doing something no Catherine officer had done in 3 generations, approaching a potential enemy alone, unarmed, and hoping that their curiosity would override their fear. The coordinates Dr. Chen had embedded in his message led her to a landing field outside his research facility, a modest cluster of buildings surrounded by rolling hills covered in golden grass. And as her craft settled onto the tarmac with a soft hiss of displaced air, she saw a small group of humans waiting, maybe a dozen figures, silhouetted against the late afternoon sun. Her heart hammered as she activated the exit sequence, the hatch sliding open to admit a rush of earth air that smelled like nothing she'd ever experienced. Complex, organic, alive with scents her implant couldn't even categorize. She stepped out onto human soil for the first time, her legs adjusting to the slightly higher gravity, her eyes scanning the group until they settled on a man in the center, middle-aged, with graying hair and eyes that held more intelligence and sadness than she'd expected. "Dr. Chen?" she called out, her vocal cords shaping the human language awkwardly, and he stepped forward with a slight smile that didn't quite reach those tired eyes. "Officer Lyra, I presume?" he replied, and she realized with a start that they'd identified her somehow, tracked her personal signature, or maybe just made an educated guess. "Your message reached us," she said, deciding that honesty was her only real option here. "And I've been sent to determine whether your warning was legitimate strategic assessment or desperation bluffing." Dr. Chen's smile turned sad. "Does it matter? Either way, it worked. You're here talking instead of attacking." They walked together into the facility, the other humans maintaining a respectful distance, and Lyra found herself studying everything with an analyst's eye, the worn equipment held together with improvised repairs, the exhaustion evident in every face, the way these people carried themselves with a strange mixture of fear and defiance. Dr. Chen led her to his office, a cramped space filled with books and papers and photographs of people she assumed were his family, and gestured for her to sit before settling into his own chair with a heavy sigh. "I need you to understand something," he began without preamble. "That message wasn't approved by any government. I sent it on my own authority, which is to say, none at all. Because I'd studied your previous conquests and realized that no elected official would ever say the things that needed to be said, the things that might actually make you pause." Lyra leaned forward, her pointed ears tilting toward him in a gesture of attention. "You risked a lot on a guess about our psychology," she observed, and he nodded slowly. "I risked everything on the hope that somewhere in your command structure was someone like you, someone who could think beyond the immediate tactical picture and consider the long-term implications. Someone who understood that the most dangerous enemy is the one with nothing left to lose." He pulled up a display on his desk, computer, showing data she recognized as human population genetics. "We've analyzed our own history, Officer Lyra, run every model we can devise, and the conclusion is always the same. Humans don't respond to existential threats the way your psychological models would predict. We don't become more cautious, we become more reckless. Our stress hormones don't trigger retreat, they trigger aggression. It's not rational, it's not civilized, it's not something we're proud of, but it's what we are. And I needed you to know that before you turned this beautiful, terrible, resilient species into your enemy." Lyra felt something shift in her chest as she listened, a recognition that transcended species and culture, because she'd seen the data, studied the patterns, and knew that he was telling the truth, that humans really were that strange and dangerous and magnificent. "What do you want?" she asked quietly, and Dr. Chen's expression softened into something that looked almost like hope. "The same thing every sentient species wants: to survive, to grow, to reach the stars and find out what's out there. But we want to do it as partners, not as conquerors or conquered. We have so much we could offer the galaxy if you'd give us the chance: our medical research, our art, our perspective from evolving on a world that tried to kill us in 1,000 creative ways." But if partnership isn't possible, if your Dominion only understands hierarchy and force, then I'm asking you to just leave us alone. Let us develop at our own pace, and maybe in a few hundred years, we'll meet again as equals. The conversation stretched for hours, ranging across topics that Lyra had never discussed with an alien species before: philosophy, ethics, the nature of consciousness, and what it meant to build something worth protecting. Dr. Chen showed her human music, which made her chest ache with emotions she couldn't name, and human poetry that her translator rendered into approximations that still somehow captured beauty in structure. He introduced her to his team, a collection of scientists and dreamers who'd volunteered to be present for humanity's first contact, despite the very real possibility that Lyra's ship was just the vanguard of an invasion force. And their courage humbled her in ways she hadn't thought possible. As the Earth's sun set beyond the windows, painting the sky in colors that seemed impossible, Lyra found herself standing beside Dr. Chen on an observation platform, looking up at the stars where her fleet waited in silent orbit, and feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. I have to ask, she said softly, if I go back and recommend that we withdraw, that we leave Earth alone, what will you do with the time we're giving you? Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, his eyes on those same stars. We'll keep doing what we've always done, fighting among ourselves, making mistakes, learning from them to slowly, gradually building something better from the ruins of our own stupidity. But knowing we're not alone out here, knowing there's a bigger community we might someday join, that will change us, I think. Give us a goal beyond our own petty conflicts. He turned to look at her, and in the fading light, she could see the same determination that had come through in his message, but also a genuine warmth that made her realize how much she'd come to respect this strange, fragile, resilient species in just one day. Will I see you again? She asked before she could stop herself, the question emerging from some emotional place she usually kept locked away, and Dr. Chen smiled with an expression that held both sadness and possibility. I hope so, he replied simply, I really do. Because I think you might be the bridge between our peoples, the one who understands both sides well enough to help us find common ground. And that's worth more than any fleet or weapon. Lyra returned to her shuttle as Earth's moon rose over the horizon, her mind churning with everything she'd learned, everything she'd felt. And when she reached orbit, she transmitted her report directly to Commander Thorax with a simple recommendation: withdraw the fleet. Earth is not a viable target. The humans pose no immediate threat to the Dominion, but any attempt at conquest will result in unacceptable long-term costs. Recommend establishing diplomatic observation posts and revisiting contact in 50 standard years when human space capability has developed sufficiently for formal negotiations. The hours that followed were tense, with High Command demanding additional justification, other officers questioning her judgment, and Lyra standing firm on her assessment, knowing that she was risking her career and possibly her life on the conviction that she'd seen something real in Dr. Chen's eyes, in the way those humans had stood their ground despite their fear. Finally, as Earth's sun rose on a new day, Commander Thorax summoned her to his ready room with an expression she couldn't read, and she prepared herself for anything from commendation to court-martial. Your report has caused quite a stir in the higher echelons, he said, without preamble, gesturing for her to sit. Half of High Command thinks you've lost your mind, while the other half is reviewing our previous conquests and wondering how many other species we misjudged because we only understood dominance, not diplomacy. He pulled up a holographic star chart showing the Dominion's territories, 17 worlds marked in their color, and then highlighted Earth in neutral yellow. We're withdrawing the fleet, he said, and Lyra felt her breath catch in her chest, relief washing over her so powerfully that she had to grip the armrests to stay steady. But not because High Command suddenly developed a conscience. Rather, because 3 of our strategic analysts ran deeper models based on your observations and concluded that the resource expenditure for occupying a world of suicidal guerrilla fighters would exceed the value extracted by a factor of 40 to 1. He leaned back, his reptilian features thoughtful. You did something unprecedented today, Officer Lyra. You made the Dominion back down, not through force, but through understanding. And that's going to echo through the power structures in ways I don't think any of us can predict yet. Lyra felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, a physiological response her species shared with humans, apparently. What happens now? she asked, and Thorax's expression might have been a smile, though it was hard to tell with his features. Now you're being reassigned to a newly created position, Special Diplomatic Observer for Earth. You'll maintain a monitoring station in their outer system, observe their development, and serve as point of contact should they reach out, or should we need to communicate with them. Congratulations, officer, you just invented a new career path. The next weeks passed in a blur of logistics and preparation as the fleet quietly withdrew from Earth's system. Their departure unmarked by the vast majority of humans, who never knew how close they'd come to invasion. Though Lyra suspected that Dr. Chen and his team were watching and understanding exactly what it meant, she established her monitoring station near Saturn, far enough from Earth to avoid detection by their current technology, but close enough to respond if needed, and settled into a routine of observation and analysis that felt less like military intelligence and more like anthropology. She watched human society evolve day by day, their news broadcasts and cultural transmissions painting a picture of a species still deeply flawed but capable of extraordinary beauty. And she found herself sending periodic reports back to Commander Thorax that read more like love letters to a civilization than military assessments. 3 months into her assignment, she received a tightly focused transmission from Earth's surface from Dr. Chen's facility carrying a simple message. Thank you for giving us a chance. We won't waste it. Also, I've been thinking about our conversation regarding human music, and I'm attaching something I think you'll appreciate: Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, which we created during one of our darkest periods, and which somehow captures both our suffering and our hope. I listen to it sometimes and think about you up there, watching over us, and I hope you're well. The offer to visit again stands, whenever you're ready. Lyra played the symphony in her quiet station, the human music washing over her like water, and she understood for the first time what Dr. Chen had meant about art transcending species, because somehow these organized vibrations of air captured something fundamental about consciousness itself, about the stubborn refusal to surrender to entropy that characterized all life, but especially these strange primates who'd threatened an empire with nothing but words. She composed a response carefully, knowing it would be reviewed by Dominion security, but not caring any more about the political implications. Dr. Chen, I listen to your gift every day, and it reminds me why I made the choice I did. Why some things are worth more than conquest or control. I'll visit when I can, when the diplomatic protocols allow. But until then, know that Earth has an advocate in the darkness, someone who believes in what you're building. Keep reaching for the stars. We'll meet you halfway. As she sent the message, Lyra looked out at Earth's distant blue light and felt something she'd never experienced in all her years of service: a sense of purpose that transcended duty or orders, a genuine connection to something larger than herself. And she knew that whatever the Dominion's future held, it would be shaped by this moment. By the day, one species looked at another and chose understanding over dominance. The galaxy didn't tremble from fear that day, she realized, but from the recognition that everything they thought they knew about power had just been challenged by a single planet species with nothing but courage and words. Years from now, when the histories were written, they would mark this as the moment the Dominion learned that the strongest force in the universe wasn't weapons or numbers, but the unbreakable will of beings who looked at impossible odds and said, "Not today." And Lyra would remember standing on that observation platform with Dr. Chen, watching Earth's sunset, and feeling the weight of two civilizations balanced on the edge of a knife, knowing that she'd chosen the right path, the harder path, the one that led toward a future where the galaxy made room for the resilient, stubborn, beautiful humans who'd earned their place among the stars not through conquest, but through the simple refusal to be conquered. The message Earth sent that day didn't just save one planet, it planted a seed that would grow into something the Dominion had never experienced: genuine partnership. And as Lyra settled into her vigil over Earth, she smiled, her pointed ears twitching, with anticipation for the day when humans would finally reach the stars, and she could greet them not as a conqueror or observer, but as a friend who'd believed in them when the entire galaxy had written them off as primitive and weak.